Good morning from where I am here in central Illinois. This is the webinar Building a Coding System with MAXQDA. My name is Michael Gizzi. I'm glad to be with you. I'm a regular here on our MAXQDA webinar channel. I'm a professor, political scientist, professor of criminal justice. I teach at Illinois State University in Normal, Illinois, about 2 hours south of Chicago, where it is currently 10 a.m. in the morning. I'm a professional trainer for MAXQDA. I do consultations and virtual trainings and workshops on a variety of tools. I've been using MAXQDA now since, I believe, 2012, 13. Whenever the Mac version came out is when I jumped on board. I'm co-editor with Dr. Stefan Rodecker of the newly released book, The Practice of Qualitative Data Analysis, Research Examples Using MAXQDA. This book is free. You can get it from MAXQDA-press.com. I highly recommend it, not because my name is on it, but because of the fact that there are 10 amazing chapters in this book providing you with great case studies of the way that people use MAXQDA in their research. And I will actually reference one of those today. I'll actually even use her project. So check it out. It's free. And you can also find the book for print, a print version of the book for $19 US on Amazon.com. It has just come out. I'm actually holding a copy in my hand. The only difference between the two is that the graphics are all in grayscale, but that keeps the price down. So if you're the person that needs to have something physical, go grab a copy. Just search for the title in Amazon and you'll find it. So one more thing, I'll go back one slide. If you need to reach out to me, my email is mgizzi, mgizzi @gmail.com. MAXQDA Press has more than my new book. There's a variety of guides there, a shorter book on focused analysis of interviews, a focus group guide. There's stuff in multiple languages. It's all free from MAXQDA-press.com. If you're brand new to MAXQDA and you don't have the software, go to maxqda.com/trial, grab a copy. It's a 30-day trial. And finally, if you're not in the research network yet, you should join it. It's also free. It's one email a month, provides you with access to a lot of training materials. And maxqda.com/research-network. That is the end of today's commercials. Let's get busy. Take a drink. So, we've got a project. We've got documents. We've brought them into the system. We've organized our documents. We've created document variables. We've done some paraphrasing. We're ready to get busy. The bulk of what we do in MAXQDA involves coding. That's what the software is really for. So today we're going to talk about the ways in which we can build a coding system. We're going to talk about the ways we create codes. We'll look at the code menu. We'll look at creating codes from within the coding browser. We'll talk about creating codes and give examples of creating codes in the document browser, and we'll talk about in vivo codes. I'll show you a fantastic example of in vivo coding. We will briefly explore the smart coding tool, although we're going to use that more next week. We'll look at visual code building using the creative coding tool. We'll talk a little bit about auto coding, some of the tools that you can use for that. And then we'll talk about organizing coding and documenting your coding system. It's kind of, as I said, it's going to kind of bleed from this week, blend from this week into next week, where we're actually going to talk, we're going to go into much greater depth about the process of actually coding your data. But this is about preparing to code. So what we won't be spending a lot of time about is sort of the underlying theories of sort of deductive and inductive coding, in the sense of we're not going to, it's not going to be, there's not going to be a deep dive, if you will, into thematic coding, where you're creating the ways in which scholars encourage people to build a coding system from the documents themselves. But we will spend a little bit of time on that, but not a lot. So MAXQDA has a menu. You can see all the menus there on the screen, a menu called Codes. And on the Codes menu, it provides you with a lot of different options. It'll show you a link to create new codes, links to the two specialized tools, the creative coding tool. It's kind of like a max map for organizing codes, but it's really kind of cool. I'll be honest, I've rarely used it, but I intend to use it a lot more in the future. The more I've been spending time the last week with it. The Smart Coding tool is one of my favorite tools in MAXQDA, although I use it once I'm in the analysis stage, and I use it when I want to further refine a coding system. I don't use it as much for creating codes to start. There's a link to get us the subcode statistics. I'll explain that later. An ability to create shortcuts, favorites, and code alias tables. So if you have a long code name, you can have a shorter name for it in reports. And we will spend some time talking about importing codes and code memos and from a spreadsheet, a useful way of doing this when you already have codes in mind, kind of drawn from theory. And as time permits, we'll also show some examples of the code cloud. First icon is the new code. This icon and tool is accessible in multiple ways. It's exactly the same every time you access it. You click on it, it brings up a dialog box. It lets you name the code. Codes can be 63 characters long, so they can be quite long. I don't generally encourage super long code names, but I can see why you might do it. They let you select the color for the codes, and you can then also tie those codes in so that if it's a top level and a secondary level, all of the codes in that section are the same color. You never need to colorize codes, but I often do because I think it's really valuable to be able to make distinctions with code colors. And there's an ability to easily add in a memo. Now, why would you want to create a memo when you're creating a code? Well, a code memo is a way to define the code. It's a great thing to have there so that at the very time you're creating the code, you can write down why you created this code or what this code means. You can define it. You are not limited to what you put in that dialog box at the moment. You can easily edit the memo using our memo tools. So I'm going to demonstrate this in about a minute. And what I'm going to do is we will come back to the rest of this stuff later, because we're going to now sort of shift to the second tool, which is in the coding system. And if you look at the code system browser, you've got all these icons at the top. So what I want to do is real briefly explain what these are. So the first icon, where'd my mouse go? On the left here is to reset activation. So if you have some codes activated that you're using in analysis, you just push that button and it will deactivate everything. Simple. The second icon, display codes from activated documents only. And again, when you hover over these things, it'll give you the name. This is a really useful tool. I'm going to show you it in a second. Then there is another link to the create a new code. There's a search tool, a preferences tool, and then an ability to undock the code system from the browser and to minimize or maximize or even close the browser. So display codes from activated documents only. Also, I'll acknowledge this is something I haven't used as much as I should. So here's a code system, right? There's a lot of codes, a lot of segments, 1900 segments coded. If I have some documents, some codes activated, or some documents activated, I'm sorry, not codes, documents activated. So in this instance, I selected a subset of documents. I selected that icon. It's grayed out, meaning a gray background, meaning that it's been actually turned on. Now notice what happened to the code system. From the left, it was this long code system, and now it's just showing me the codes that are in that document. That's a really useful tool for when you're trying to kind of mine down and explore particular documents or document groups looking for differences. The search tool is also real interesting. Hang on a second. The search code lets you, when you click on it, it opens up this submenu. You can type in whatever word you want, and any examples of that word will get highlighted. So for example, I selected robbery, which showed up twice in the coding system. There's icons for case sensitivity, for partial word searches, the ability to activate codes with the term, so, or activate. So if I searched for robbery, I clicked the activate code, it would activate those two codes for me. So it's kind of a neat tool. The preferences icon provides a lot of options, many of which I, again, don't really use as much as I probably should. An ability to tweak the user interface to your liking. You can change it so that the display frequency shows coded segments in all documents, in activated documents, coded segments in open document. The open document shows document groups, document sets, or documents. So it's just going to narrow what you see. You can sum up frequencies of subcodes, click a code to apply the code to a selected segment. I don't have that on it. Probably should. That would be kind of neat. Table view of your codes. We can go into this in a second. So let's escape from PowerPoint. Something we all want to do. I've got a document, a project open. It's one we used in the document groups webinar a few weeks ago, where we had imported documents in. You'll notice that, and I'll show, one, here's the code menu, just like we saw before. Interesting how that one was highlighted, but you notice the code system. It's got no codes in it because we're starting from scratch. Okay. Notice a couple things. New code. New code. Doesn't matter where I do it from. Click new code. Brings up the code. I'm going to type up legal theories. I'm going to create a code. Didn't create a code memo for it. I should have, but you all know how to create a memo. All you have to do is right click it and add the memo. This is going to be the overview. This is going to be a top level code for theories. I want to create another code. Keep it real simple. Oh, I can change the color on this one. You notice here, this one's showing up underneath it. Why? Well, because I was highlighted on this. I had this code highlighted when I created a new code, and it automatically made it a subcode. Say I didn't want that as a subcode. I can just take this code and drag it. If I've got the code system selected, I select new code. This is just going to be dummy code. It's there. If I've got this selected, click plus, new code. It's a subcode. If I want to move this as another subcode, I can drag it into it. If I want to reorganize it, I can do that. Oops. It's a little finicky. You gotta kind of play with it to get it right. Now we're going to talk more about reorganizing codes later, but I wanted to just create a couple that way using the coding system. Of the tools that we were looking at, this is our blank project. It's got nothing in it, so let's go to a version of this project that does have stuff in it. A lot of stuff in it. Okay. Can activate that document. Here's my code system. Select this. Now my code system has shrunk it down. So only where the examples where that's there. Oh, search. Let's search. You notice here, I type an R and it immediately starts highlighting. Reasonable grounds, reasonable suspicion, reasonable expectation, and privacy. If I click this, I've now activated those three. Case sensitive. If I turn it on, it doesn't activate any of them because I didn't use it begin with an R. Turn that off. Let's see which one this one I'm going to do. Oops. Can't remember off the top of my head, but those were supposed to limit, they were delimiters, and for some reason it's not giving me what I wanted. Starting letters. whole word. Okay, so it limits it. It wants a whole word. Okay, so reason doesn't show up, but reasonable will. So it's kind of useful. And then there's a search and replace tool. So we could take reasonable and we could turn it to reason. And it just changed it. Very useful. Now, I don't really want to change the name of that, so I'm just going to hit a Command Z on my Mac and undo that change. Preferences, table view. What's that do for us? Gives us the code system as a table. I don't prefer it that way. You can limit it to display emotive codes only, put paraphrase segments at the top, focus group speakers at the top. Where you insert new codes, do you put them at the current location or at the top? So for example, I'll say at current location. So I'm here, I create a new code. It puts it there by default. I switch it back and it automatically will put it right where I was, because that was stupid. Because I was selected in here, so I would have to be up here to do it. But so there's a lot of options there. I wouldn't get overwhelmed by that. Let's go back to our smaller project. So any questions about creating codes from this right here, from the code system itself? So what I want to do is I want to explore coding these three coding options within the document browser. Now, to do this, you'll notice they're grayed out because in a document, you have to actually have text. You notice the second I began to highlight text, two of these opened up, code in vivo and code with a new code. So I intentionally, these are paraphrases on the right and they were meant to be dummies so I would know where in the document to look for this. This text here establishes what we call a bright line rule right there. I highlight it, I can right click it and say new code, or I can use this and say new code. I can also add a comment on that code. So I've created the code. Now, the second I created that code, this segment now has sorry, somebody's calling me. world we live in. Thinking of that. Sorry, I'm going to turn Do Not Disturb on. I forgot to do that. So I've created this code. You'll notice this code now shows up here, the top of the system. That's by default. Summit not for several weeks. This will be several weeks before there's a recording of this. So the bright line rule code is there. It has a default blue code color. If I want, I could move it, but I'm going to leave it there for now because I want to talk about organizing codes later. You'll notice here that that comment that I created shows up here in the sidebar as long as I have comments on. So that's how I can create a new code that way. There's something else though in MAXQDA called an in vivo code. An in vivo code is where the code is automatically created using the language that you have highlighted. So I'm going to highlight this text. I'm going to use the right click version and say in vivo, or I could do in vivo there and watch what happens. Now I have a code that's much longer, and in fact it doesn't give me everything because I've exceeded the 63 character limit, but it automatically creates this. In vivo codes are intriguing, and next week we'll spend a lot more time looking at them, but let me show you an example. This is from Danielle Jacques' remarkable project, which she presented at Max Days, and which is described in depth in chapter 1 of the book. Yes, always the salesman of a book that there are no royalties for, so it doesn't really matter. And what Danielle did was she had, it's all in French, so she had selected whenever there was a piece of text written by someone or in her interviews that struck her as useful, and in terms of something she might want to quote or something that just sort of jumped out at her, different from her normal coding system. She used in vivo codes for it. And so you'll notice here she's got a whole section of in vivo codes. There's something you're going to use not necessarily in the bulk of your analysis, but at that point in time where you're looking for examples or where you want something that's just sort of going to jump out at you. So I'm trying to build a coding system. Now, I may know from the theory underlying my research what several of the codes are going to be. It may be crystal clear to me that there are certain things I want to cover, in which case I can create those codes deductively just by using the new code system, repeating it. I can make that process easier by using some of the import tools. So instead of having to click on this button over and over again, kind of bringing this up, if I want, I have the ability to import the codes and memos from a spreadsheet from the code menu. So when I click on that, it's actually kind of a nice improvement here. It shows me actually what the spreadsheet should look like. So I have a spreadsheet. I've got a spreadsheet. All it has to have are two columns. A column for the code and a column for any menus if I choose to put them in there. A list of codes. You'll notice here, hang on a second. Is that better? All of these codes, yeah, no problem. All of these codes are all going to be imported as top level codes. You'll notice here though, and in fact, one is done correct, one is done incorrectly. Originalism / Bill of Rights is saying that originalism is the parent code and Bill of Rights is the child code. I intentionally did this as an example that I'm going to import to show you what will happen when I put the / in the wrong direction. Okay. So I've got this spreadsheet. I'm going to start all over. Oops, I guess I didn't have to. Import codes and memos from spreadsheet. This is always going to show up. I click OK. Click open. Woohoo! Look at that. Just like that. I now have a coding system. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, if I were doing this, I would have structured that coding system with the subcodes intentionally, but I want to be able to show you how to do this on your own. So I sort of made errors. Notice the error I made. Originalism / balancing of interests did not put this the way Bill of Rights was put under originalism. So if I want to fix that, what do I do? Well, I have a couple things I can do. I can right click it and I can say rename code. Balancing of interests. And then I can drag it to originalism. That's what I can do with that error. It's simple enough. Say I wasn't paying attention and I had a whole bunch of these organized, but I had the slashes in the wrong direction. After I imported it, I saw I didn't like it. I would literally just delete it. Delete the code. Like this. It's gone. MAXQDA will allow you to have codes with the same names. I generally don't encourage it. You can limit it yourself so that no duplicate code names exist on the same level. So that's another tool that's useful. So importing from a spreadsheet, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Let me show you another way to create codes. Let's create codes visually. The creative coding tool. Now, when I click on this, it's going to bring up this window with the code system here. Okay. And the way this works, and there is one limitation to this, this tool will not work unless there is at least one code in your coding system. Okay. You absolutely have to have at least one code in your system first. But I have several here. And you'll also notice it's all sort of grayed out. The only thing I can view are code frequencies right now, which is none because we haven't really done anything. That's not doing anything interesting. So say I take this code here, I drag this code to here. Automatically creates a code map. Now, we're saying we're doing this to create codes. How? You'll notice this is still grayed out. You have to turn this on. Start organizing codes. Now those codes are showing up here, and it's giving me colors as an option here. So before I do that, I want to, oh, no. Originalism. Let's grab a couple other ones and throw them in here. Start coding. It's now the menu is shifted to colors, so if I wanted to apply this color to this, I would just simply, select that color. Yeah, okay. Here's what's cool about this though. My originalism theory, I've got a series of codes that I want to actually make subcodes. Select originalism, line, originalism to philosopher's writing. Philosopher's writing to text and tradition. Actually, I want to drag this. Turn that off. Move this over here. So now I've got a structure that I've created. I also got a map. I can save that as a map in Max Maps. I'll show it to you later. I can export that map out. I can copy it as a graphic. But I'm using this tool because I wanted to create some new codes. Well, let's see, what else am I missing here? Original intent, balancing interests. Just going to make this up. Create a new code there. You see, once this is on, I have to turn it off to be able to move it. And so I could simply put living constitution there, and which is the opposite of originalism, but I put that there. So I've used creative coding here. You can get really useful with this later on. I'm going to quit it. It asks me, do I want to apply this code structure to the code system? The process is non-reversible. If you only wanted to create a map, well, then just say no, but we want to do it. So we click yes. Why didn't it do it? Son of a gun. Oh, it did. Here's the thing I was missing right here. Originalism, balancing of interests. This is this code is here. Philosopher writing is a subcode of originalism. This is a subcode of this. Now, can I go even further? Yes. I can keep going as deep as I want in this. Yes, Alicia, I think you're right. And the thing with MaxQDA, I constantly, in training about this software, I come across a tool that I never used. And it's like, why didn't I use this? Partially because there are so many tools available to you, you use what you need or what you want to use. And so that's a great comment there. Um, Now, I've reorganized these codes. Let me give you another hint. I don't really like what I just did. Command Z or Control Z on a PC. I can undo what I've done here. I can even undo the creation of that structure there. So I've created a code structure using the creative coding tool. Let me show you briefly the smart coding tool, but it's not going to do much because you'll notice here nothing's coded. The smart coding tool is useful only when you actually have coded segments. So I'm going to switch to my student's version of this project, done by an undergraduate about 2 years ago. He did not use the smart coding tool at the time. He coded a lot of stuff. What the smart coding tool is useful is when you have already existing, let me clean this up. There's so much stuff. All right, so this is what I'm interested in. Originalism. What this is doing is showing me all of the segments that are coded with common law, the documents, the coded segments. In a few weeks, it'll be available. The documents, the coded segments, the codes that are assigned to this coded segment, and the code comments that exist. This is a useful tool which I want to kind of go in greater depth next week. But say this example here, I'm making this up, also applied to this code, but it wasn't coded that way. I could drag this, and now that code is assigned to it. So it's a real useful tool. I use this tool in the analysis stage. So in 2 weeks, we will spend a lot of time talking about the ways. Sure. So I've opened the smart coding tool. I click on a segment. So there are 9 segments with this code, right? These are long segments. Let me do this one instead. The document, the coded segments. I can turn the document off if I want to hide that column, but the document, the coded segments, the codes, comments that were added to the code. Say I think that this particular segment here should also deal with stare decisis. I take this, I drag it to the code. The plus button shows up to copy. And now what's happened is when you return here, now that this document has been coded with both. So I also, while I'm in the smart coding, did that help? When I'm in the smart coding tool, say I'm reading this here, and he's got philosophers' writings right here, but say I actually want to add a code for Blackstone. I'm really curious how many times in this project Scalia references the legal theorist Blackstone. Select this comment here, create new code right there. I'm going to say Blackstone. Use the color of the parent code. Oh, all right, I put it under philosopher writing, but you'll notice when I did that, it didn't add this. Oops. Here's the other thing, philosopher writings. To add the code, you have to go from the segment to the code. Blackstone shows up. Okay. Now that's the one segment that has it. If I right click on this, I can say create and assign a new code. We'll call this Blackstone 2. Now you'll see that it gets automatically created. So my options for creating a code with the Smart Coding tool is either to right click while I have it highlighted in green, create and assign a code and assign, or create a code which will end up in the structure where you are. We will spend a lot more time with the Smart Coding tool next week, but I wanted you to see it. Make sense? Cool. It's a really powerful tool, and I like to use it when I'm analyzing data. I like to use it because I like to be able to see all of the coded segments just in one place in a way which is much more easier to read than, so here's philosopher writings, right? And I can scroll through these as opposed to doing this. Oops. Sort of going one at a time. I prefer the table view. I think it's a lot more useful for analysis. Smart coding. Oh, I left off something while we were in here. Color codes. All of these are tools for creating codes. Emoticodes, highlighting codes, magenta, yellow, green, blue, red. You'll notice in this project, you see the yellow highlights, which are coded as yellow important concept. My student, when he saw something that he thought was important, like this, I'm just making it up, he would segment it, select it, and create and highlight it. And it automatically got coded. Now, how did it get important concept added to it? All right, let's get rid of that because we don't need that one. If we look here, he renamed it. Instead of right-clicking to rename, I like to sort of click into it. What I would do, and my student chose just to leave yellow there because he knew it meant something to him, I guess, by keeping it there. You could also just eliminate the word yellow, and then all important concepts in the case are going to show up like that. He had several that were red, but they were unclear to me why he coded them that way. Emoticode. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it, but a long time ago there was a tablet version of MAXQDA that lets you only code with emoticodes, but they've pretty much stopped development of it. Here I can, yes, use emoticodes. I could use my police officer. And it will code it as a police officer. Okay, it's just the visualization. It's up to you if you want to use that, but those are all tools there. Open coding mode, which is interesting, so I turn that off. If I highlight, it does nothing. In open coding mode, I highlight release, automatically gives me an ability to create a new code. It's like on the fly. I don't have to actually I don't actually have to go through the process. I can just engage in open coding. Just, so highlight, it creates it. That will keep doing that until you turn it off. Magdalena's ahead of me. Thank you. And when I'm not in PowerPoint, I can use the chat. There we go. Let's see. So many tools. So we've gone through this, subcode statistics. So let's go to originalism. This is his main area. Click subcode statistics. Actually, I don't need to do that there. Select originalism. It's going to show me statistics for all of the subcodes for that. We call this a top level code or a parent code. You'll notice it's not coded. It could be. I usually encourage that the organizational codes get left as they are. Okay. The code alias table lets me take these code names and create a shorter name that will show up if you're using reports. And so, like, if this was too long of a code name, you would want to use the shorter version. Oh, since we're here, we can export our code system and import a code system from another project. I'm not going to demonstrate that today. I didn't think we had time for that. But if you have an existing project with a code system and you want to create a new project and you want to start from scratch, but you want to import the codes only, you can import that code system. You first export the code system in the old project to a code book, a MAXQDA code system. I'm assuming this is one from other projects. You can import it in. I oftentimes just will, if I have an existing code system, I routinely just change the name of the project, rename the project to something else, and then delete what I don't want. But that is useful. So originalism, and I activate these codes. Code cloud. Insert those activated codes. Why aren't they coming? Looks like I need documents first. Huh. There we go. It's a code cloud there based on just the codes. Let's say I take his majority opinions it's doing it based on those codes in the majority opinions. Let's do this again. It did it on all of the codes. And the biggest one that showed up is yellow, important concepts in case. Not necessarily helpful, but that's okay. So lots of tools there. Let's see, it's 11:05. I want to talk a little bit about reorganization. Many times you've seen over the last several weeks, you've seen my legal project on my current research project on the third-party doctrine. It's what the book chapter deals with. I'm going to turn off this document system. What I've done is I've loaded up a really early version of the project. It doesn't have all the cases. It's not fully coded. But what you'll notice here is this is kind of messy. This is really kind of messy. Let me show you the final version. One day, I haven't backed up in a day. Notice here, crime groups, homicide, armed robbery, sexual misconduct, drugs, property, other crime. Where are they? This was originally like this. Sort of. I've even done more cleanup with it. How do I get from this? This is what we originally coded. And it's common, right? You create a lot of codes. How do you get from there to this kind of neat grouping? Well, there's a couple of ways you can do that. One way you can do it is you can use actually the creative coding tool of all things. I'm going to drag all those cases into here, start organizing them. Watch what happens when I do this. Merge codes. I've now got that down to 64. Where'd it go? Now it moved it to the top because it created it as a new code, at which point I could organize it. So that's one way you could do that. It's not how I actually did it with this project. I'm going to go to this example here. And I'm only going to do this for a couple, just to show you a couple of them. There's some, it's a little tedious, but it's easy enough. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new code called crime groups, which I'm going to spell wrong. I'm even going to give this a memo that this is a top level code. Aggregating, aggregating? Yeah. Never mind. Crime group here. Now, I want these codes to become all one thing. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to right click this. I'm going to duplicate the code with the coded segments. Homicide now shows up as homicide with a 1 after it. I'm going to do this. racketeering now shows up with a 1 after it. I'm going to drag that into crime group. Drag this into crime group. Attempted murder and shootings. Duplicate code with coded segments. Drag this into crime group. Oops. Now, I've got a copy of it. My original code's still there. I don't like to delete codes, even though it might not be as neat. I still like to have them. Here's what I can do now. Merge codes. Now all of these codes are listed as attempted murder, but that's because of the order there. I rename it. Now I've got homicide. Now I seem to be missing one, and I'm not certain why I only have 11 instead of 6, 1, and 5. I think I know why. I think the racketeering case probably was also coded as homicide, so it ends up becoming just 11. We ended up doing this through all of these to try to create, because you'll notice we have this long group of codes. And now there were several types of codes that occurred only once. At the time, there was like one burglary, there was one bank fraud case, one carjacking, one tax fraud case. Actually, carjacking appeared to be twice. I'm not certain why. We did a lot of cleanup to get the project so that it had a neatly organized system. So a lot of the property crime cases, all these types of crimes that I would put under property crimes so all of these were property crime cases. They all got merged and put into as one code for property. Then I can see what I did there. Did the same with another tool. We had another part of the data set that had an awful lot of subcodes. We simplified it. Why did I do this? Well, I did this because this gave me larger ends. This gave me an ability to do an analysis, which made a lot more sense. It made it possible to do analysis. The code matrix browser. Where I'm just sort of looking at these. This wasn't the one I was thinking of. Because my brain's starting to shut down. But you can easily copy, you can merge, you can also you can copy the coded segments. Actually, that only made a copy of them. It had nothing to do with the structure, because that would actually, I believe, nope. I'm going to end with that, I think. Well, folks, have a great day.